Hey, wait a minute. This isn't right. Hang on, let's make this more normal. Ugh, you know that's not what I meant. A short disclaimer before I start. I had to record this game twice because the first time through, my recording software showed my mouse pointer on screen for the whole game, despite it not showing up for me while playing. Unfortunately, I played the first playthrough on normal difficulty, and all my comments on combat were written from this perspective. To re-record the whole game quickly and avoid delaying the video, I switched to very easy mode. So the gameplay doesn't always match my descriptions of combat. However, all my points still stand for playing this game on the intended difficulty.
All men dream, but not equally. Those who dream by night, in the dusty recesses of their minds, wake in the day to find that it was vanity. But the dreamers of the day are dangerous men, for they may act their dream with open eyes to make it possible. This I did.
In this era, Naughty Dog were certainly dreamers. They bragged about how each game in the series was pushing the hardware to its very limits, but their dreams had a cost, and in this game, that cost finally caught up to them. After the phenomenal success of both previous games, there's a lot of hype to live up to, and with their ethos of always seeking to improve on the previous title, this meant that Naughty Dog had to somehow find a way to top Uncharted 2, which was already being called one of the best games ever made by the time the third game released. Well, if you ask the critics, they succeeded, as this game reviewed incredibly well, with multiple 10 out of 10s from even the large publications. But if you ask the fans, most people point to Uncharted 3 as one of the weakest entries. So who's right? Well, let's start at the beginning once more and look at how this game was made. Hot off the release of Uncharted 2, Naughty Dog was already in development of Uncharted 3, with leadership aiming for the same 2-year development cycle the second game had. However, even in the first game, there was huge amounts of crunch to get it in under the deadline, with developers describing living at the office to get it done. However, as is the way with most studios, at first this was romanticized, with the developers laughing about it in the first set of behind-the-scenes documentaries. It wasn't brought up in the material for the second game, but in an interview later in her career, Amy Hennig, the lead writer and game director for the series, states that there was crunch on every game, but she specifically says it was the worst for Uncharted 3. After the success of 2, there was extreme pressure to create something of an even larger scale in the same time period. And to quote Amy, trying to finish a game like that, Uncharted 3, in 2 years is insane. Especially when you're saying that the 2 years is everything, pre-production, production, etc. Time is a huge one, but then everyone is racing with cost versus time. So could we do it with smaller teams longer? Sure, but then we tend to throw people at these things and burn money really fast. We've all seen games that took too long and they kinda got lapped. Combine this with the second factor impacting the game's development and you can understand how things got this bad. At the time Uncharted 3 started development, Naughty Dog officially split in two, with half the development team working on Uncharted 3 and the other half working on the then unannounced Last of Us. While the company had grown to the point that despite the dev team being split in half, roughly the same number of people were still working on Uncharted 3 as had worked on 2. However, it also meant that it wasn't the same team, and I can only imagine that integrating new team members to fill the roles of developers who swapped over to The Last of Us must have made things even more difficult. The effect of all this is not just that the development was more rushed than either previous game, but that it affected team morale. To quote an interview with Amy Hennig once more, when asked about the crunch, she had this to say: "There's people who never go home and see their families. They have children who are growing up without seeing them. I didn't have my own kids. I chose my career in a lot of ways, and I could be single-minded like that. When I was making sacrifices, did it affect my family? Yes, but it was primarily affecting me, and I could make that choice. But when I look at other people, my health really declined, and I had to take care of myself because it was bad. And there were people who, collapsed or had to go check themselves in somewhere when one of these games were done, or they got divorced. That's not okay. Any of that. None of this is worth that." It's one thing to crunch in a scenario where you feel like you're all in it together and it's just for one game, but after 2 games of crunch and then the team being split to make another game at the same time, you can only imagine how crushing it must have felt. However, before we get into it fully, I must take a brief interlude to discuss emulation, as once again, for the sake of recording, I am emulating this through RPCS3 instead of spending hundreds of dollars on the esoteric equipment required to record from a PS3. As previously mentioned, Naughty Dog loves to push the hardware to its limits, so that meant that this game was the most challenging of the series to emulate. If you're going to try it out yourself, I'd advise following what the wiki suggests for emulation settings, and then enabling basically every single one of the patches in the patch menu. You can pause for my settings here if you care. Doing this does cause some visual issues, but while it breaks some visual effects, the only noticeable one is that all the lighting in the Citadel level is bugged. But other than that, these settings got me the most playable experience. Despite all that, however, it still had sections that ran below 30 FPS, so tinker with your own system because it's just a demanding game to emulate. Now, after the opening quote from the beginning of the video, we are thrown right into the action, just like the previous 2. However, unlike the iconic intro to the second game, this one doesn't start with a mystery, but with a London pub. We see our 2 favorite treasure-hunting scoundrels looking to make a deal to sell Nate's iconic ring for a whack of cash to one of our 2 new villains. I don't have a ton to say about him now, but don't worry, I'll have a lot to say about him later. Now, as you might expect, the deal goes wrong and we end up in a classic barroom brawl. Since the first game, Naughty Dog have said that melee combat is a pillar of the Uncharted formula, but this is the only game where that has really felt true. Probably inspired by the Arkham games, you now have a counter button and a throw button, so when an enemy swings at you, you can counter their attack. However, sadly, it's not as smooth as in the Arkham games, as it only works sometimes, and when it does, the game slows down and shows you the button prompt, so instead of it being a skill-based mechanic, it generally feels more scripted than anything else. This is a shame, because my complaint with Melee has always been that it's just mindless button mashing, and that could have been a great way to add some more mechanical depth to it. The throw, however, is a much better implemented idea, as when you've done enough damage to an enemy or they are otherwise stunned, you can now grab them and throw them into either a nearby surface or off a nearby ledge. It feels very Indiana Jones in the best way. The appeal of Indiana Jones fight scenes is the improv style, as Indy will often grab any nearby object to use as impromptu weaponry, or utilize his surroundings to his advantage. The new grab feature in Uncharted 3 gives you that same freedom, as there is a shocking number of environmental interactions. Whether it's using props in the environment, throwing people downstairs, or just smacking them into a wall, because it's player-led, it feels way better than the counter. Furthermore, instead of time slowing down and you hitting a button, you can now look for potential improvised weapons or hazards in the environment in real time, and then try and use them to your advantage. So Melee, while still a missed opportunity, is better than it was before. That is, until you meet the new brawler enemies.
Just give me a second there, mate. I'll be right with you.
These guys are always easy to spot, as they usually have no guns and are about 8 feet tall. The idea is that they rush you and force you into melee combat, but unfortunately, all the good stuff I just discussed about adding mechanical depth and player interaction to the melee system goes out the window with them, as they are basically just a really dressed up QTE. You hit them until the game gives you a button prompt, then you hit the button and go back to punching them. It even reuses the same animation every single time. Most likely due to the aforementioned rush development, these guys just feel like a clearly unfinished idea. Well, Talbot wants the ring, and we didn't give it to him, so he brings in the big guns and calls in his boss, Marlowe. Turns out, her and Sully have some history, but this reunion gets cut short when...
Give me that back!
Oh no, oh.
Shut up!
Now obviously, they aren't actually dead, but it does give an interesting hook for the story as you want to know how they aren't dead. But for now, we get a flashback. And fun fact, Young Nate's outfit is actually the outfit shown from the very first E3 demo for Uncharted 1. So in a way, it is the outfit his youngest self wore. Some people criticize this section for its lack of action, but personally, I think this game could have done with a few more sections that slow down and focus on the story like this. It serves as your basic climbing and stealth tutorial, and for that, it functions quite well, because you've got lovely environments to climb around in, and story-relevant reasons to be sneaking around them. Also, during this section, you can appreciate the technical improvements they made to the Uncharted engine between 2 and 3. The devs are always focusing on technical details that match the setting of the game. So in the first one, you had foliage and water. In the second one, you had dynamic snow and physics for the mountainous and urban areas. And now for the third one, you've got bloom and heat distortion for the hot deserts. A lot of games in this era were known for their overuse of bloom. In fact, bloom itself has gotten a bad rap. But overall, I'd say Uncharted 3 is one of the more tasteful implementations of it I've seen. It sells how hot and bright the sun is, without ever encroaching into the image clarity or appearing in places where it makes no sense. After all that, we are introduced to young Sully as well, and while some people aren't into a grey fox, we can all agree, this guy fucks. I will once again praise the writing team for these games, because even if you've never played an Uncharted game before, in this single interaction you learn everything you need to know about him, and for returning players, it doesn't feel like padding or recap, as it's just a good character moment. Also notice the attention to detail with Sully's cheap tank top pilling. It's crazy how much detail they put into these games, even with the disgusting amount of crunch. Or maybe it's because of the crunch. Coming back to steal the decoder, we get a proper introduction to our main villain, and I'd say it's arguably the strongest villain introduction in the series. In the first game, the villains had zero personality, and Lazarevich only met Nate about halfway through the second, so introducing our main villain here, having her interact with both main characters, and then also having a distinct characterization is a definite improvement. While she is still fairly generic as an evil old British woman, she is at least threatening in a way that the first villains weren't, and Lazarevich's cartoonish stereotypes could undermine. Now, as we get chased across the rooftops, it seems like a good time to mention another massive positive for this game: the soundtrack. While the soundtracks have been fantastic in every single one of these games, I think the third game has easily the best one, and the addition of the Middle Eastern oud on top of the traditional orchestra just adds such a fantastic, adventurous feel to the soundscape. So have a listen. As you might be able to guess, this chase ends up with Sully saving Nate and then taking him under his wing, explaining their relationship as well as their relationship to the villains. Once again, solid writing.
I see great things in our future, kid. Great things.
Enter stage left, Charlie Cutter, who is voiced by Graham McTavish, same guy who voiced Lazarevich in the last game. He seems like your average thug, but there's some more fun layers to his character than you'd expect. And as we travel through this alleyway, we get the first quirk of his character, his claustrophobia. And pretty soon, we get another returning face, with Chloe showing up as well. Now that the gang's back together, it raises one important question. Where's Elena? Uncharted 2 ended with them on seemingly good terms, so where'd she go between games? This is not a question we get answered until much later on, but for now, we've got some puzzles to solve. Once we perform a 4-man car cosplay, we gain entrance to Marlowe's tunnel network. This starts the first real combat section of the game. First off, it's obvious to see that they took the rudimentary stealth established in the second game and built it even further, as now you can get full-on silenced weapons. I consider this to be a good change. As I mentioned in my video on 2, being able to take care of goons in stealth feels a lot more believable and right for the characters than just blasting your way through the villain's private army. However, despite the stealth improvements being a positive, I find the combat is a step back in most other regards. The most noticeable thing is aiming. The developers said they wanted to tune the aiming to feel more responsive than it did in the first 2 games. However, somehow, they made it so much worse. It's hard to pin down exactly what feels so off about aiming in this game, because I couldn't consistently recreate the situations, but it feels like it has some kind of aim acceleration that goes a little haywire. When you're trying to make small adjustments to hit a headshot, it flings your crosshair all over the place. But then when you need to track a moving enemy, it's somehow now drenched in molasses and takes a year for you to turn. In the first game, I complained about how repetitive combat could feel, as combat in Uncharted games has always been quite bare bones. In the second game, I complimented how they sought to alleviate the mechanical simplicity of combat with interesting new contexts for the combat to take place in. This supplemented how basic the combat was by giving external complications that forced you to approach combat differently and kept it from getting stale in a way that it did in the first game. Unfortunately, that stale repetitive combat loop has reared its ugly head once more, as most likely due to the rushed development cycle. Combat has mostly returned to flat arenas full of chest-high walls where you just play whack-a-mole with generic goons. One thing I can give credit to, though, is the ability to toss back grenades, which is a great addition to combat. It solves the issue of enemies spamming grenades when you're already low on health, and removes some of the frustration you could get in some of the later combats in Uncharted 1 and 2. Also, just plain satisfying. After clearing out the goons and doing some minor puzzle solving, we finally get the decoder back and can slot in Sir Francis's ring and start decoding. While I could easily sit here and poke holes in the narrative saying things like, "Why didn't Marlowe just get another ring made?" These games have always had those kinds of plot holes, so that's just lazy criticism. The stories of the Uncharted games have never been about the minutiae of the mystery. They're about the grand adventure and the character moments in between. If Nate can survive a train crash, then Sir Francis can make a decoder that only works with one ring. This culminates with the gang splitting up as Nate and Sully go looking for a chateau in France, and Cutter and Chloe go looking for a castle in Syria.
Look, we track down these clues, we find Lawrence's lost city. I'm sure of it.
As Nate and Sully arrive in France, I'd like to mention another positive of this game, the presentation. While the presentation in Uncharted has always been a high point, they've managed to keep the same consistent level of quality even in the third entry. Gordon Hunt is once again back to direct the motion capture cutscenes, and as with the other 2 games, they feel extremely cinematic in the best way. The camera work, the blocking, the acting, it all feels so natural. The only real difference here is that now, much like Uncharted 2, all these actors have worked together on 2 games before and have a level of comfort with both each other and the rest of the team that really comes through on screen. They have since mentioned in interviews that both Richard McGonigal, who plays Sully, and Nolan North, who plays Nathan, consider this the most fun game they've worked on. You can see it play out in how much improv there was backstage. Take a look at that intro again and check out these outtakes where they're just trying to make each other laugh with ad-libs.
You did bring the map, right?
Thought you brought the map.
Oh, for Christ.
I'm just kidding. No, she had a wooden leg with a real foot. Strangest thing I've ever seen.
You can pick 'em. You do know where you're going, right?
No idea, actually. Lost my bearings hours ago. Come on, I'm kidding, right? We're close.
Leave it to you to find a friggin' jungle in the middle of France.
Yeah, it's a gift. But surprise, surprise, we're on the right track. Chateau should be this way.
You sure about that?
Absolutely not. Come on.
And then just a little farther on, we get this great line that was also an improv from Richard.
Look, Sully, your first car.
After finally arriving at the chateau itself, we get an extended platforming and puzzle section looking for hidden rooms and clues. While this is going on, I'd like to mention something else about the presentation, which is how incredibly good this game still looks. I mean, genuinely, this game is over 10 years old now, and other than the occasionally low poly models, this game holds up unbelievably well. After getting separated from Sully, we move through this cave, and I should make an arachnophobia warning for this video, as it has a shocking amount of creepy spider stuff, which was actually foreshadowed back in Marlowe's hideout. And interestingly, swarms of spiders have actually been a concept that was in the game's files all the way back in Uncharted 1, but it took this long to get properly implemented in the full game. When we make it back to the surface, we find that Talbot followed us here, and now the manor is swarming with goons. Or maybe it's gooning with swarms. Moving through some more generic shooting gallery sections, I'll mention one more positive about the melee system in this game. If one of your guns is out of ammo, or you don't have one, when you perform a melee takedown, you steal the goon's weapon in slow motion, and it's always cool. Making our way deeper into the manor, we get another puzzle, and this is where I'll mention a genuine high point of this game, and something I would say it does 1000% better than either of the previous games: the puzzles. Amy Hennig mentioned that they had a new puzzle designer for this game named Amelia Schatz, and that she went on to design all the puzzles in this game, and it shows, because the puzzles in this game are genuinely great. I was critical of the puzzles in the previous games, as they often felt like they were there more for pacing than as actual puzzles. You'd figure them out in seconds, but it would take minutes to execute. Well, in this game, you get a lot more puzzles, where you're given much vaguer clues and then have to actually figure it out yourself. For the most part, these puzzles are actually quite clever, and feel satisfying to figure out. Take this one, where you're given the number of symbols you have to step on, and a start and end point. Then you have to use logic to figure out the path to take across. Still not super difficult, but more satisfying than being given the path from the start, like the previous games were liable to do. Moving deeper in, we find another laboratory, and there's some more plot stuff about John Dee and Queen Elizabeth and Francis Drake and how they were all in some kind of secret society. And this is a point I'm going to nitpick, because this is a crazy thing to just drop into the story. It feels like it should be a much bigger reveal, but they just mention it here, and then it never comes up again. They never even explain what the secret society is, what it wants, or any of it. While I said I won't nitpick all the little details of this story, I will take issue with bigger details like this, because when the grander narrative of the adventure starts to break down, that's when it starts to ruin the immersion. Nevertheless, we must continue. And now, deep into the crypt, we get another puzzle. And this one is an even better example of how much the puzzles have improved, because you get very vague hints. You know you have to position these tiles in the correct spot, but you only get the answer to one of the tiles. You can use logic to figure out the second, but then you have to explore the room to figure out the last two. And while once again, it's not actually that difficult, it really helps build the treasure hunter fantasy, making you feel as smart and clever as the characters are. After retrieving our treasure, we get another confrontation with Talbot, who has once again miraculously followed us. He takes the treasure and the room fills with spiders. And while the spiders don't like the light, of course, our torch is going out, so this leads to another chase sequence. And there's a lot of these in Uncharted 3. While I don't hate them, they do get a little repetitive, as the devs can't make the platforming too difficult, because you have to be able to figure out your route while running away or towards something. So it tends to boil down to just holding forwards and mashing jump. After escaping the spider horde, Talbot sets the mansion on fire, and we get to fight through more goons while escaping the burning manor. While visually spectacular, a lot of this section is even more on rails than usual, and doesn't really have too much to mention. Upon escaping the burning chateau, we get a very interesting cutscene, because on one hand, it's well written and very well acted, but on the other hand, it feels really out of nowhere, and somewhat out of character too.
I gotta say, I'm losing the plot here. Remind me again why we're doing this?
No. If you're gearing up for one of your I'm too old for this speeches, spare me.
Nate, these guys are playing for keeps.
Yeah, so? What, you're just gonna roll over for them now?
Nobody's talking about rolling over.
Then quit acting like you're ready to lay down and die, all right?
Listen, kid. I've had you back for 20 years. I'm not going anywhere, obviously. I just want to make sure we're doing this for the right reasons. You got your pride all tangled up in this thing. It's making you reckless. I taught you better than that. Gonna get yourself killed. Oh, damn. Hell. Probably get us all killed.
While I like what they're doing here, building on the idea that was presented in the end of the second game, questioning Nate's morality and why he does what he does, this just feels way too early for this. If it was happening halfway, or 3/4 of the way through the game, then maybe it would hit harder. But so far, there isn't any evidence for Nate being willing to sacrifice everything and everyone for this treasure, and this hasn't been more dangerous or death-defying than any of our other adventures, so this whole monologue comes off feeling a little hollow, no matter how well directed the scene is. Arriving in Syria to help Cutter and Chloe, we do some platforming before running into more of Marlowe's men, and Nate says it best himself.
Shit. Already?
And that basically sums up this whole chapter. It's just tons and tons of generic combat encounters in these very visually dull, gray levels. And while the hacks I was using on the emulator broke a lot of the lighting, even in the areas where it does work correctly, it's still the most visually boring level of the game. This makes the repetitive combat arenas feel even more repetitive, because we don't even get cool locations to fight in. So what actually happens in this chapter? Well, we find Cutter and Chloe, and we get an extremely contrived reason for Nate and Sully to be here.
What happened to you two? We've been trying to reach you for over 24 hours.
Oh, right, I need to top up my minutes.
You're using a prepaid phone?
Mate, those contracts are a complete rip-off.
What? Mine's broken.
Again?
I mean, they could have just as easily had Chloe or Cutter call Nate and say, "Hey, Marlowe's men are here, we need your help," and gotten to the same place, but I digress. This is also the level where we start to see my other big complaint with the story. Talbot. Talbot is magic, and not just in a the writers hope you don't notice kind of way. They draw direct attention to Talbot being magic. He appears out of nowhere.
Shit.
He's gone. How in the world?
He survives getting shot in the chest without even leaving a bullet hole in his suit, and he gets Cutter to jump off a building by setting it on fire, and then you find a tarot card on him that shows someone jumping off a burning building. So what, you're thinking? Both of the previous games have included the supernatural. What's the big deal? Well, thank you, Straw Man, but I'm not going to explain why this bugs me so much just yet. Keep all this in mind for when we reach the finale. For the scene at hand, all that matters is that Talbot drugged Cutter, and now we have to deal with him going loopy while we move through this cave. This is a section where I'd really like to give Graham McTavish some respect, because if you're someone like me who has been unfortunate enough to experience a panic attack, then you know that this is an uncomfortably realistic depiction of what that can feel like.
Come on, mate. We're almost there.
Oh God, it's good. It's closing in. It's closing in. Just stop it. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I've got to get out. I've got to get out. I've got to get out.
Calm down, all right?
After fending off Cutter and dealing with more spiders, the tension of which is somewhat undercut by the magically reappearing torches you get, we finally reach our big puzzle chamber and get a puzzle about rotating a globe to line up with these projected images. This bit always stuck with me, because I grew up near a park which had a big globe just like this that also rotated on top of a fountain, and I always used to like climbing up onto it to push the globe around just like this. But instead of being a public nuisance, pushing this globe gives us access to the next area and the next clue in the story. Talbot corners us again, and we barely escape. And I'd just like to mention that during this escape section, this level looks so much better during the day, and I wish they could have just set this whole level after sunrise, but whatever. We make it out, and we get another cutscene questioning Nate's motivation. This one feels a little bit better, as it's less extreme and feels more believable now, as one of the crew has seriously gotten injured. So bad, in fact, that Cutter gets entirely written out of the story from here on out. That's another thing that bugs me about the story in this game, because there were a lot of scheduling conflicts behind the scenes. The writers just had to write around it, rather than waiting for the actors to be available. Graham had to go work on The Hobbit, and therefore gets written out of the story. This is also where Chloe gets written out, and it just feels wrong, because her character in the second game was the extremely self-confident and self-reliant merc who wouldn't let anyone tell her what to do. So her just giving up because someone got a boo-boo feels a bit out of character. Nate and Sully aren't giving up, however, and now they need to get to Yemen. Sully says he knows someone.
All right, we gotta find a quick way in. No hassles.
Think I might know someone we could call?
Who? Oh, no. No.
You got a better idea, I'm all ears.
And as Nate and Sully head to the Middle East, Elena is finally introduced again.
Elena Fisher, foreign correspondent.
Hey, Sully.
How you doing, sweetheart?
Oh, no. Sorry, that's sort of frowned upon here.
Oh, right.
You two can hold hands, though.
How are you, Elena?
Good, thanks.
You look great.
So, against my better judgment, these permits will get you through most checkpoints.
Okay, great.
Oh, and I shouldn't be worried about what's in those bags, right?
Of course not.
No.
Yeah. Not yet, anyway. All right. Remember, you're journalists now. So try and act respectable.
Think you can handle that?
I think she's talking to you.
Now, despite this being a funny cutscene, it also sets up a whole lot. First off, the actor for Elena, Emily Rose, was having a baby at the time and didn't have the time to be in the whole game, so she's only in the second half. Despite this, the writers actually work it in really well, and in a very interesting way. We have now learned that Nate and Elena were actually married and are now separated, divorced. It's not entirely clear, but something went wrong in the time between games. Honestly, I think this is a bold and very well-handled idea. In basically all stories, marriage is the end goal. It's the safe zone for a relationship. Nothing can go wrong once the characters get married. So introducing not only their potential marriage, but their subsequent separation is a really interesting direction for the story and adds a unique dynamic to the rest of our time with Elena. We can take a decent guess from how Elena still wears the ring and Nate doesn't, as well as him acting like a petulant child, that it was probably his fault. After making our way through the city, and Nate taking a quick break to fight some goons, we make it to our goal.
Well.
It's cute.
What?
Because it's a well.
Shall we?
And we get another good puzzle. As you try and line up this diagram with the right section of the room, it feels like something straight out of Indiana Jones. After solving that puzzle, we move into another visually stunning location, which also starts to piece together the idea that maybe Ubar isn't something that should be found. As you walk down the hallways, you have the optical illusion of the statues' faces following you, and you see the imagery of death all around you. However, that doesn't stop Nate, and so we have some more puzzles to do. Despite this being clearly inspired by the scene from Raiders, it's still a super cool puzzle, clever in both concept and execution. After all that, we finally get what we've been looking for, as we have a star map to find Ubar, Atlantis of the Sands. Here's another really weird story choice. Instead of writing this down in his notebook, Nate has Sully somehow memorize the entire star chart in all of 15 seconds, because right after this, we somehow trigger more spiders. And even as someone who isn't arachnophobic, this is pretty icky. No, thank you. However, it's a credit to the art and tech teams that these spiders feel as icky as they do. Upon escaping, we once again question the value of pursuing this treasure, as Elena points out that we've won. We have the clues and Marlowe doesn't, but Nate still wants to continue. It's an interesting reversal of a similar conversation in the first game, where Nate wants to abandon ship, but Elena convinces him to continue. However, this is cut short when Nate is now the one getting drugged from Talbot's magic darts. This section is honestly pretty cool. The visuals are as trippy and psychedelic as you'd hope, and the voiceover is ominous and hypnotic, really bringing you into the headspace. However, I do think it lasts too long, but more on that in a second. Once we wake up from the trance, it is revealed that while tripping balls, Nate was actually giving up all his secrets to Talbot and Marlowe. Here we get some more interesting dialogue with the villains.
But ask yourself, when he scooped you off the streets of Colombia 20 years ago, did he save you from that life? Or did he just doom you to this one?
Naturally, Nate breaks free, and we start another one of those chase sequences I mentioned before. Except now, instead of running away from something, we are chasing something. But the gameplay is the same, just hold forward and occasionally mash the jump button if any obstacles show up. While the set piece is visually fantastic, it's a good example of one of the overarching problems this game faces. It's just too damn long. Take this chase sequence. We're going through varied and visually appealing locations, the music slaps, and it's exciting. But then it just keeps going, and going, and going. And that's how almost all of these levels feel. They start out really cool and exciting, but then every single one of them outstays their welcome. I think if you made this game about 3 hours shorter by cutting 15 to 20 minutes off each level, you'd have a much tighter experience that would be remembered a lot more fondly. But when this chase finally ends, we get knocked out once more and wake up somewhere brand new.
يا صباح الفلافل والحمص والبابا غنوج.
This is the best example of how convoluted and contrived the story of this game gets, as we are now in a ship graveyard occupied by pirates who also have Sully. We get introduced to a character who has never shown up before in the story, and the only time you see him is if you're paying attention to the background characters in the preceding scene. See, he's there at the table with the rest of them. However, it's never explained why he's there. Furthermore, with Marlo and her crew being ruthless enough to kill a child to prevent loose ends, it seems insane that they would just leave Nate with these random pirates and assume they'll just kill him. This is immediately proven by the fact that Ramses leaves him alive and immediately tries to use Nate to double-cross Marlo and get the treasure for himself. Earlier I said I wouldn't nitpick small plot holes in the story because these games are more about the overarching adventure, not about each individual plot point. But this is the kind of plot hole that impacts the overall feeling of adventure. In Uncharted 2, you end up in a Himalayan village through a similarly contrived series of events. However, they still logically flow into each other a lot better. To quote Trey Parker and Matt Stone,
we can take these beats, which are basically the beats of your outline, and if the words "and then" belong between those beats, you're basically. You got something pretty boring. What should happen between every beat that you've written down is either the word therefore or but.
this is how a lot of sections of this game feel. Instead of, Nate gets on a train because he needs to rescue Chloe and stop Lazarevich, but the train crashes because Chloe didn't actually want to be saved, but Nate gets saved by a nearby village. Uncharted 3 feels more like Nate gets captured, and then they let him go. And then they give him to pirates, and then the pirates let him go. And then they don't actually have Sully. And then the boat sinks by accident. And then Nate ends up literally back where he started, rendering the entire segment pointless to the plot. Seriously, he doesn't learn any new information, or have any character growth, or advance the plot whatsoever. It's a literal wild goose chase that goes nowhere. It's made even more frustrating because gameplay-wise, this is one of the best segments of the entire game. While I forgot lots of other bits about this game, I clearly remembered the ship graveyard and the sinking cruise liner. This is peak Uncharted right here. Climbing through visually stunning locations, fighting bad guys through ever-changing contexts, like diving underwater to avoid sightlines, punching dudes inside of decaying ships, shooting goons while hanging from precarious ledges. It's great stuff. And then the whole ship section afterwards, honestly, gets close to the excitement of the train sequence from Uncharted 2. Firing RPGs at other boats through the rolling storm waves, fighting through moving cover on the deck of a rocking ship, and all that before you end up sinking the boat and fighting through the sinking ship before getting this incredibly cinematic escape sequence. However, right after that, we get the most insane plot contrivance in the entire series. Because while holding on to this single board, Nate washes back up on the beach of the exact same city he just left so that he can rejoin Elena and continue the plot. Once again, it would have been so easy to just have him jump in a life raft or anything that floats better than a single board after the boat sank. Or hell, just put this section at a different point in the game. Like maybe Sully and Nate take a boat to Yemen instead of a plane, and the pirates attack them on the way. And then Nate actually has to rescue Sully from them, and it's a real moment of reflection for him as he sees the danger he's putting his friends in by continuing his quest. It ends with the two of them on a life raft, and they can still end up in the right city. I mean, you could even use Sully's whole thing about being in the Navy and navigating by the stars.
I didn't do all that time in the Navy for nothing, you know.
but it would then be infinitely less contrived and not make you question how stupid Marlowe and Talbot act, and it would actually have some relevance to the overall story. When you have that Talbot chase in Yemen, you could just have it end with Talbot getting away, and when Nate goes back to Elena, he finds out that Marlowe took Sully while Nate was drugged, allowing the story to end up in the same place. Because, once again, I must restate that this section with Ramses and the boats does nothing for the plot. It literally ends up exactly where it starts, with nothing in the story changing. There is an explanation for this, however, as in an interview about the game, the devs admitted that the set pieces of the game were created before the story was written, so they had to write their story to accommodate the set pieces rather than having them grow naturally from the overall story. It explains a lot about how disjointed and weird the pacing of this game can feel. However, now that the story can resume, we get a really good scene with Nate and Elena, showing both how much Nate actually cares about Sully, and showing that despite their separation, there's always a reason that Nate and Elena were together. Now, after all the complaining I've done about the game up until this point, from here on out, the game is nearly perfect. The ending of this game is so strong, it can easily overpower a lot of flaws from the start of the game. From here, we move stealthily through the airport, and not so stealthily take out all the guards. And if you've seen literally any marketing for this game, or even the box for that matter, then you know what's coming next. Personally, I wish they didn't put it in the box, or in the marketing for that matter.
For a chance to win epic trips and exclusive access to Uncharted 3. Subway, where winners eat. Ow.
Because this section is so cool, and it would have been even cooler if you had no idea it's coming. However, I do understand from a marketing perspective why you gotta show the most visually exciting part of the game. But after Elena helps us board the plane as it takes off, we enter one of the best extended set pieces in the entire series. You fight another one of these brutes, and it sucks because it's the same as all the others, but at least you get a fantastic backdrop for this one. However, once you beat him, things quickly kick off, and hanging off the cargo netting while flying over the desert is iconic, and rightly so. Following that is fighting through the cargo hold as the cargo shifts and the plane falls apart before getting sucked out into the sky, and I just love the use of sound design for this section. Now that we are in the Rub al Khali, we get the most unique section in the entire series. Some people deride this section saying it's boring, but those people have no taste, because this is straight cinema. Take a notice of just how much work was put into this single 10-minute segment. The way the sand falls into your footsteps, the way it crumbles off the edge of a dune, the way Nate's walking animation has changed as he gets more and more exhausted. This is a section that has a completely different feeling from anything else in the series. We control Nate as he wanders aimlessly through the desert, and we keep getting these moments that feel like the Deus Ex Machina we're all expecting, but then it gets taken away again. It builds the sense of genuine hopelessness as you watch every single attempt at survival fail him. You keep expecting the next one to work, but it doesn't. And as your options dwindle, you get a fantastic voiceover from Rosalind Ayres that really sells the hopelessness of the situation as she reads passages from T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland.
Only there is shadow under this red rock. Come in under the shadow of this red rock. And I will show you something different. From either your shadow at morning striding behind you, or your shadow at evening rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust.
The only problem with this section is that when you do stumble upon a town and climb into the well, it's not completely dry, but somehow it's
undrinkable.
Even Amy Hennig agrees with me.
So this is the part I would change if we could. I wouldn't have said that in hindsight. Because it's sort of like he's had enough hits. This needed to be a little win. And so it sort of felt like it would have been wise to make that drink feel like it revived him.
Well, whatever. We climb out of the well, and, surprise, surprise, Marlowe's men are here too. I do appreciate that it gives a believable explanation at least, that they were looking for the lost plane, so it makes sense they'd be here, and that Nate would run into them, as he probably hasn't gotten that far from the downed plane himself. The combat is pretty solid here too, as the introduction of destruction into the environment keeps it feeling fresh, and none of the arenas outstay their welcome. However, right when it seems the most hopeless, we finally get our save here, as Salim and his warriors save the day and rescue Nate. Finding that they have a common enemy, they team up to stop Marlowe and save Sully. And a small footnote here, but think about how rare it is for there to be a Middle Eastern hero in gaming. Even though he only has a small part in the game and isn't much of a character, it's still cool that they completely ignore the stereotypes and these are just some super chill dudes. This is also where we get the third game's version of the convoy segment. Every game has one, and this is easily the best one so far. They managed to kick it up even further here, as now you are riding a horse while firing a rifle and pushing goons out of trucks. It's a really great section, adding an even further level of interactivity to the set piece that already makes you feel like an action hero. In the second game, it was carefully scripted to feel freeform while still being on rails, but this time, it's genuinely in your hands how you handle it. You can ride up and push dudes out of the trucks, or stay on your horse and shoot them from afar, or mix and match as you see fit. It's just a fantastic set piece through and through. After crashing the trucks, a sandstorm rolls in and we get separated from the rest of the group. And thus follows a section with some really cool potential, but not great execution. The idea of using the sandstorm as cover to stealthily take out the guards is awesome, but they're placed in such a way that even with the reduced detection, you can't get more than a couple without being spotted. Then you have this section fighting 2 armored cars, and it just sucks. The only way to blow them up is with an RPG, but you have to run into the open to get one, so it's just a lot of waiting behind cover for your health to recharge. On the bright side, however, we get this awesome visual of the walls of Ubar peeking through the sandstorm, which is both gorgeous and imposing, perfect for this final act. Moving into the city itself, Naughty Dog have once again completely delivered on making the treasure hunt worth it, as this city is absolutely breathtaking. The gilded towers, the bright contrasts of color, and the storm wall of sand in the distance is just incredible. One of the most memorable images in the series. After moving into the city, we get a scene that I saw coming even as a kid, but still hurts.
Now that's a hell of a thing. What?
No. No. Please. Sully.
Now, I'm really torn on this scene, because on one hand, it's thematically appropriate and goes along with the foreshadowing all game about how Nate is going to hurt his friends by keeping up this quest. It would force some serious character growth from him. However, on the other hand, Sully is one of the best characters, and this would completely change the tone of the game, from a fun adventure to a dark tragedy, and I'm not sure that works for an Uncharted game. I remember that when playing this as a kid, I was genuinely convinced that Sully actually died, and it was heartbreaking. This scene is so well acted, and it's perfectly tragic how little fanfare it gets. But as you can guess, it does end up being a fake out in the end. From here, we get the second Nathan tripping straight sack section. This one is both more and less interesting than the first one, because in this one, way more happens than just running through wiggly streets, but on the other hand, it has the most frustrating combat sections in the whole game. Welcome back, late game difficulty spikes. I missed you. These guys can teleport, tank extreme damage, and throw fireballs that insta-kill you. It's just not fun. On the other hand, the section in the pool room is awesome. The psychedelic visuals are striking, and the mood is properly eerie. And then the section running through Nate's past while it gets overrun with spiders is a genuinely unsettling visual. And the albeit very on-the-nose image of Nate pointing a gun at Sully drives home the feeling that Sully's death is his fault. This section is also just a lot shorter. At the end, of course, Sully is still alive, and it turns out the water in Ubar is laced with a hallucinogenic, tying back into the story of a great evil being sunk into the reservoir. Reunited once more, Nate and Sully go into the incredibly beautiful underground cistern below the city. Again, a simply gorgeous area, before finally finding Marlowe and Talbot in the deepest part of the city. Firing these tiny torpedo rockets somehow starts the entire city collapsing. It's pretty dumb, but at least they lampshaded earlier.
The whole city's resting on this cavern. Doesn't look very safe, does it?
And later.
3 goddamn bullets! How the hell did you do this?
I still don't get why they didn't at least make it an RPG or something more powerful to make it feel at least a little more believable. I mean, there's tons of RPGs around after all. But now we must run through the collapsing city in an echo of the finale from the second game. This section is fine, but it does feel like retreading similar ground. As we try to make our escape, we confront Marlowe for the final time. I think this is a fine idea. It makes Nate seem more heroic again, and tracks with his confrontation with Lazarevich in the second game, showing he won't kill someone defenseless, even if they are pure evil. Regardless, we can't save her, and she sinks into the sand. A decent end for her character, as it is her ambition that sinks her. Right before we finally make it out of the city, Talbot catches us once more, and we get this game's final boss fight. On one hand, it's arguable this fight is the weakest yet, as it's just a nicely dressed up QTE. On the other hand, the boss fights in the other games sucked so much, I don't mind this being so simple. At the end of it all, we shoot Talbot, and he just dies. So remember when I told you to keep in mind that Talbot is magic? Well, this is where I complain about it. Talbot is easily the biggest missed opportunity in this whole game. He's set up as a magic entity and doesn't seem human. Then we learn about the sunken vessel of the Jinn, and even as a child, I put 2 and 2 together and thought that this was leading to Talbot either being an escaped Jinn trying to free his brethren, or a disciple of them who'd been granted their power in an effort to free them. And that's a really cool idea. A Jinn who isn't at full strength because of the magic vessel being locked away, who works with a treasure hunter to find and free his people, is an awesome idea for a villain, and it tracks with the supernatural twist endings of the first 2 games. But instead, we get this complete anticlimax. We don't even get to know if there's anything magic about the vessel at all. It just sinks away, never to be seen again. It's a frustratingly missed opportunity in my eyes, with all the foreshadowing they set up earlier to just shoot him in the end. However, while the story of the villains is a disappointing anticlimax, the resolution for our heroes is fantastic. We get this truly touching final cutscene that for a long time seemed to be the end of the whole series.
Hey, hold up a minute, Nate.
You okay?
Yeah. Yeah, I just got something needs saying, that's all.
All right. What is it?
Look, I had a lousy father, a lousy childhood. I hit 40, I figured I was never gonna have a son of my own. Hell, I never wanted one. What the hell do I know about raising a kid? Then you came barreling into my life.
Look, you don't have to.
No, listen, I do. I have made a lot of mistakes, kid. A lot. And, well, I am not a perfect man.
You're not proposing, are you, Sully? I mean, I love you, but...
Stop. Just stop being a wise ass for 1 second.
How long you been carrying that around?
Too long.
Thought I'd lost it.
Here's the thing, kid. We don't get to choose how we start in this life. Real greatness, it's what you do with the hand you dealt.
Hey.
Hey. Going somewhere?
Maybe. I'm really sorry about your ring.
It's all right. I swapped it for something better. Let's get out of here, huh?
Yeah.
Come on, we're this way.
But...
Come on. Trust me.
What are you up to?
No way. It's not as nice as the one you two wrecked 4 years ago, but it'll do. Come on. Let's see if I can remember how to fly the goddamn thing.
Hey, this has parachutes, right?
Oh, yeah. 3. More or less.
So to answer the question from the start of this video, is Uncharted 3 as bad as they say? Definitely not. While I don't think it's as strong as the second game due to the inconsistent pacing, questionable story decisions, and lack of innovation in the gameplay compared to the second, I still think that the gameplay is solid. The story has high points, and the puzzles are vastly improved. Combine that with the great soundtrack and some of the best set pieces in the whole series, it's not a bad game at all. Just, not quite as memorable as the second. My current ranking of the games would look something like this. Now that the final game in the original trilogy is complete, I'd like to take a few minutes to wrap up my thoughts on the whole series. I will still talk about Uncharted 4, but it was made by a different team with different goals and feels very separate from these first 3. Playing through these games again reminded me just how great they are, and how surprisingly unique they are. While there are other games with bombastic set pieces, other games with great characters, and other games about hunting treasure, I can't think of another series that combines all of these so well. At the end of the day, it's always been the writing that makes them so good. While the gameplay is fun, it's always been simple, and the real drive is the characters. They feel both so real, but also have that romanticized, larger-than-life feeling of a classic adventure movie hero. However, they have a lot of depth that those swashbuckling heroes usually lack. They're unsure, they fight, they make up, they get sad, they feel hopeless, they feel human. It's what will keep these games feeling special for many more years to come. And it's what has never truly been replicated since. For this, I have to put as much praise as I can onto the 4 people most responsible for this. Amy Hennig, the lead writer and game director for all 3 of these games. What she did here is truly astonishing, making 3 games in 5 years and having all of them remembered fondly. Despite working within the limitations of the console generation and the, at the time, extremely limited view of what games could be within the games industry, she managed to make some of the most successful games of the generation. Then she was also able to make much more positively masculine characters than you usually see for an action-adventure story, especially at the time. Nate has emotions, and he doesn't just express them through rage. He gets sad, he's unsure, and he can still be a hero. While these games are dated in many aspects, there are still many more that feel as fresh and exciting today as they did back then. And I wish more modern games had set-piece moments with as much interaction as the Uncharted games do. The other 3 people deserving of praise are the 3 lead actors, Nolan North, Richard McGonigal, and Emily Rose, who together built such a genuine feeling of camaraderie and had such good chemistry, they took the great writing and made you believe it. The friendships, the fights, the final reconciliation would never have landed nearly as well if it wasn't for the extremely talented actors who not just voiced, but embodied the characters as well. I would highly recommend playing through these games again if, like me, you haven't played them since they came out. And if you've never played them, well, there's no better time. Despite how in-depth these videos are, they are less than 1/10 of the length of a single one of these games. So there's so much more I could never cover in a sensible length of video. I will be covering 4 and Lost Legacy in the future. This isn't the end of the retrospective, but this is the end of an era in this saga, so I felt I needed to put my thoughts down for this part of the series. I hope you have enjoyed, and as always, I will see you next time.